So there's been a lot of discussion on the video I put out about monarchy, and most of it there's not much like flaming or people insulting each other. Most of it is like good faith discussion, which is always great to see. And people have offered criticisms, most of which are relevant, or I'm not even sure if criticism is the right term, but kind of questions. So I just figured I'd go through some of them. So firstly, just wanted to say, in case people were wondering what books this is based on, these were both by the same author. It's Emperor: A New Life of Charles V and Imprudent King: A New Life of Philip II. Both are excellent. He's, I think, substantially more sympathetic towards Charles, but he's generally speaking judges them by the standards of the time. They're generally pretty good. They're good biographies. So this is something Christian Dissident said. Argent, some critics of monarchy would say that advocates of monarchy are compensating for the lack of a good father figure by wanting a strong and paternalistic figure in a king. What are your thoughts on this? I don't really think there's anything wrong with wanting a strong father figure. I mean, everybody wants a strong father figure. Even if you're like an alpha male and a king, you still look up to God as your father figure. I mean, that's just kind of the natural order of things, that regardless of who you are, you want a strong role model who you can look up to and you can try to emulate. I mean, growing up as a kid, that's what you do, and you keep doing that as an adult. Like at most workplaces, someone will have a mentor or some figure who they try to model themselves off of. American Syndicalist said, I remember at one point you said you were at least supportive of fascism, but I'm sure with your newfound monarchical leanings that supportiveness has gone down the crapper. Just curious if it's something you still support or not. My opinion on fascism hasn't really changed. I generally like fascism. My issues with fascism is I don't like the police state or domestic spying. I don't like the cult of violence, and I don't really like the imperialism. But a lot of other aspects of it, I do like. The populism, the one-party state, the organic structure. I am generally speaking supportive of it. Okay, let's see here. The original fascists had a monarch under Mussolini, as did Franco's Spain. People often forget that. Yes, I tend to agree. There's no reason you can't have both. Plus, obviously, you're not going to get an autocratic, like, traditionalist monarchy. I just think it is a scale. Like, you can have leaders who are more like a monarch, even in a republic. People who more respect the dignity of their position, who more try to rule and try to respect God and that kind of thing. As I said in the previous video, some sort of authoritarian, conservative, or non-democratic regime is way, way better than what we have now. Way, way better. For once, I disagree. Monarchy is a terrible idea. Most of the examples you've given would not work nowadays. Respecting your people and taking care of your country was a product of the time. Could you even imagine what kind of monarchs we'd have nowadays? Just imagine someone like Susan as the head of a country instead of YouTube. That being said, the arguments against the system in place are perfectly valid in your eyes. So that's perfectly fair. But I guess my kind of point in the video was, I don't think it would produce worse leadership than what we have now. And I think, like, even if the leadership was as bad as what we have now, I think the inherent incentives in monarchy, as I said, with regards to having to think over a longer period of time, would be less bad. Fritz Imperial, shout out. No king outside maybe Herod has ever treated their people as bad as our democratic leaders have. Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly true. History is full of bad monarchs. Many of them waste money or do or say stupid things, and some of them are chinless wonders or blatantly inbred. I mean, I don't think I denied that. all forms of government are flawed. All human beings are flawed. But I mean, we get that anyways. We get like inbred dynasties like the Kennedys or the Bushes. I'm just saying I'd rather it be formalized and have some sort of like tradition guiding it. What is your opinion on William II? I don't have one. There are good qualities to a monarchy, but I do see some negatives as well. It's often anti-nationalistic tribal. Yeah, I think that did change a bit over time. Once again, I don't think there's an issue with really combining aspects of fascism and nationalism with monarchy. You saw that a bit under Napoleon III. The issue is that nation states kind of started to form when monarchies either ruled over multiple states or the nation states formed as like a revolution that dissolved the monarchy. So I'm not really sure, to be honest. Let's see here. The main issue with absolute monarchs is once you have them, you're stuck with them. Aside from your points on nationalism and monarchs not being represented in the country, monarchs can support fascism, National Socialism, any number of different ones. If, let's say, a monarch was a mass murderer, literally, they could not be prosecuted because of sovereign immunity. I mean, my point was our current leadership is really bad too. Like, if we want to talk about it, our current leadership has killed like tens or hundreds of millions of unborn babies. They're taking your kids away and cutting their dicks off. I mean, I get that we aren't living under like Stalin or Mao at the moment, but let's not pretend our leadership isn't like garbage. I really like that picture of the real European Union. Yeah, I am somewhat sympathetic to pan-Europeanism, at least in the continent. Like a Latin state would be kind of cool if it was like the Low Country, like the Benelux, France, Italy, and Spain, and Portugal. But I mean, it's not even like it's not even vaguely similar to what the EU would be. I remember it's really cringy because when the EU was being formed, they took Charles V and Charlemagne and put them as like precursors to the EU. The idea of having like a universal Christian empire that encompassed all of Western Europe has no resemblance whatsoever to what we have today. Also, do you really think Philip II, who ethnically cleansed the Moors, do you think Charlemagne would let in the refugees? I really, really am going to have to press exit out on that one. This sounds like idealistic, utopian thinking. Kings can be super corrupt and incompetent. History shows this is not worth the risk, as opposed to like the current system. I don't know. I'm just saying it's less bad than our current one, to be honest. Democracy has proven itself to be worse. I mean, yeah, that's my point. So the idea is that an inept and corrupt government solution is to give more power to the government to fix the mess they created. What I'm advocating for is modern state security has control and influence over our lives, the lives of normal people more than any monarchy ever had. Yeah, but like to me, corporations have substantially more power than the government does. Like, who has the bigger ability to ruin your life? I mean, the government can throw you in jail, but corporations can make it so that you are never able to earn a living. I think also companies are not accountable to anyone. Government is at least somewhat accountable to public pressure, to elections, to that sort of thing. But corporations aren't accountable to anyone. So if I have to choose between state power and Facebook and Twitter, I'm going to prefer state power. Like, it's not even really close to me. They're talking about the Arab Gulf, which I don't really want to talk about, to be honest. Okay, I'm just going to skip through that. I think my ideal version of the US. Maybe just briefly about the US. Of most of the world's republics, I do like the US. I'm not like anti-American. I think a lot of the Constitution thing is cringe. And while the American civic religion can get very, like I said, cringy and obnoxious, like with my freedom, at a basic level, Americans at least have an understanding that there is a social contract, that the Constitution is what's traditionally American, and there is a certain degree of sacredness to it. There is, I think, more than some other countries, a certain sacrosanctity to the position of president. And you do have like a lot of traditions and rituals and ceremonies and stuff like that. I think if nothing else, the fact that America has kept the same constitution, I mean, there are amendments, but they were all done legally for as long as it has, really says something. Like a lot of countries will throw out their constitution every like 10 years or every like half a decade, whatever it's convenient. The American people are like willing to fight and die for their constitution. And while you may not like it, it is, I think, a more, I do respect that a lot more than, I don't know, a country like France where they change their form of government like every 30 to 40 years whenever it like becomes inconvenient. So that's my thought on that. How did monarchy fail so bad against revolution? It's an interesting question. I'll deal with that at some other point. There's a lot of different reasons for it. I don't list any true positives here. You really just illustrated how bad an idea monarchy is. What monarchy is better off today? Every monarchy is full of struggle, succession crisis, civil wars, fights to blood, overpower, intrigue, including France. That's a big reason England had such a foothold. Human nature and the lack of vigilance to good principles. I mean, there's problems with all forms of government. I do, and I've said this many times, have a lot of respect for Queen Elizabeth. She's my queen, as Jon Snow would say. And I do respect her, whatever her flaws are, for dedicating her life to the service of her people. I think if Queen Elizabeth held political power, the country, England, would be way less bad than it is today. But I mean, that's just kind of it. Monarchies today in the state are affected by monarchism. It shows how twisted modern politics are. Let's see here. France, he tried the Templars and the bishop. Other than that, the only thing I have a hard disagreement with is the utilitarian argument for a state religion, which to me is pretty cringe. I mean, I don't see why necessarily. Let's scroll down. So talking about elective monarchies, I mean, elective monarchy I maintain is like one of the biggest memes, because there's no like succession mechanism. There's no succession mechanism. There's often not really continuity. This happened a couple different times in the history of the Holy Roman Empire. Like Charles almost lost election to Francis of France, which would have been both a disaster and base, because you would have had an emperor of both France and Germany, which would have been kind of cool, but it would have been a mess. The 30-Year War was largely caused by the Protestant states trying to get a majority. I just prefer like Salic law or agnatic or whatever you want to call it, where there's a clear line of succession. I was talking to someone, so France didn't really have succession crises. There was a minor one during the War of Three Henries. That was more an issue of non-Catholics not being able to inherit. The 100 Years' War was kind of the English just kind of memeing and using an excuse to invade France under very, so. Let's see here. I agree. I disagree. The whole history of Europe is a history of inbreed half-cousins fighting for prestige. Personally, a republic with limited voting rights. Only net taxpayers could vote for representatives. And military retired and active for the executives. It's an interesting... I don't know. I just don't think limited franchise republics are sustainable. Um, I'm not pretending my ideal form of government is either, but I think it invariably the franchise gets expanded. Also, there's a lot of issues with net taxpayers, like there's retired people, that sort of thing. I don't know. Let's see here. Uh, um, Monarchism is the only realistic proposition for a serious Catholic. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Catholic Church, Christianity doesn't posit a particular form of government, in the same way that Islam does. I don't think like you can necessarily have to be a monarchist to be a Catholic or a Christian in general. I think there's a lot of historical stuff to support that, being kind of the preferred form of government, but I don't really see an issue fundamentally with it necessarily being like that. I mean, America has remained a lot more Christian than many European societies has. Despite that, I don't know. I kind of like Venice. I think people are too hard on it. If a monarchy is like the old German Kaiserreich, then yes. If it's an Anglo one, then no. I'm for absolutism, but it should be based off of merit, virtue being based, and ethnically belonging to said country. Yeah, but I understand that. I understand why that's such a, like an attractive idea. But in practice, I just don't think elective monarchies work. I think it leads to constant succession crises. Um, let's see here. Also, absolute monarchy is a meme. I mean, I don't even know what it really means. I think what it means in actual terms is a trend in European politics on which feudalism gave way to modern centralized states, where the king governed through a standing army and a professional bureaucracy rather than through local elites and nobles. I think that's what it meant. But the idea that, like, I don't even know if there's ever been a society where the king, maybe ancient Egypt, and maybe like North Korea, which you could probably call a monarchy, are examples of what would generally be considered absolute monarchy. But everybody is accountable to somebody, like the Cortes or the nobility or the merchant class or the church. There's always somebody who they're accountable to. They're talking about Norman England. Well, my ancestors are Normans, so I think it was based. The Normans are really badass, to be honest. But yeah, with regards to police state, I mean, I'm not entirely hostile to a lot of, uh, at least what's interpreted as traditional Anglo ideas, like a man's house is his castle, that people shouldn't really be spied on in their personal life, that restrictions on freedom of speech are more for public speech than what people do in private. I don't like that stuff. I don't like when companies are like trying to track down your social media and come up with ways to get you fired and that sort of thing. I think the irony is if you think about it in the US, the police state exists entirely to deal with diversity. I mean, what are the main things the police state deals with? Drug cartels from Mexico, Islamic terrorists, the urban demographic, Chinese spies. Obviously, there's like non-diverse, unless you want to count it. I don't count Italians, but there's like the mafia. There's the Dixieland mafia. There's obviously crime issues within the old stock American community, but most of the things that require like this huge surveillance state came about because of diversity and because of other problems. I mean, there's a lot of issues in Scandinavian states, but if it wasn't for liberalism, they really wouldn't need much in the way of a police state at all, other than to just deal with kind of routine crime. Because they are societies that, at least traditionally, had high levels of social trust. Now, I've talked a bit to people who lived under Francoist Spain, and they said, by and large, Francoist Spain was fairly, laid back with regards to it. They had just kind of set things up and established it. They purged a bunch of people. I think one of Franco's issues is he didn't kill enough people, but that's a topic for another day. And they weren't really that harassed in their daily lives. A lot of this stuff comes about because of low social trust, because of external threats, things like that. Like, Americans would probably largely be able, you wouldn't need, like, all these things. I mean, you still have the CIA, because it's like most countries need some sort of foreign intelligence agency, but like the FBI could literally just deal with organized crime, because there's always going to be organized crime, and they wouldn't have to deal with a lot of the nonsense we have at the moment. Also, if we're going to count like the reactionary militias, if the government like hadn't turned society into this liberal cesspit, you wouldn't have those guys. And even then, they don't like how many people die from right-wing terrorism. I mean, unless you want to count Islamism as right-wing terrorism, but like from American conservative terrorists, how many people do they actually kill? Not very many. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the matter. I hope you found the video interesting and enlightening. Thank you to everybody who posted. We got a lot of good comments. The critical ones were, generally speaking, respectful and productive. I mean, there's nothing wrong with shit posting, but I do appreciate it when people have an actual discussion rather than just flame people. I mean, especially if it's like a video where I'm trying to be thoughtful. Like if it's an e-drama video or me doing like a parody or trying to irritate people, then yeah, like all the flames I got in my Nier Automata review. But it is always nice to see that. It kind of gives me some hope. So God bless everyone. Go in peace with Christ. Talk to you real soon.